There are so many different types of jobs that you can be hired for as a filmmaker, and each one of them can require something different in terms of equipment and your camera build, things like that. But I have a few rigs that I like to use personally, so let's break those down for you today. What's happening, everyone? My name is Ryan, and today I wanted to show you 3 camera builds that I like to use for the Sony FX3. Let's get into it. This is my Sony FX3, and I use it for a lot of the projects that you see here on the channel, and also for some of the client work that I do as well. This is the Sony 24-70. For the purposes of this video, I'm gonna be mainly using this lens or my Sony 35 1.8, which is on the camera I'm filming with right now. Now, first off, I wanted to say that you're gonna see a lot of gear mentioned in this video. I'm not sponsored by any of the brands that you're gonna see. These are just the pieces of gear that I like to use personally, and it's really just put together with all of the different pieces that I've acquired over the years. Now, you might be wondering, why would I need a camera rig? So I wanted to quickly dive into that. Sometimes I like to just use this setup right here. I'll use the flippy screen, but as you know, and as you've probably seen in some of my other videos, it gets really tough to film with just this LCD screen. So I like to rig my camera out with an extra battery so that my camera lasts longer, with a field monitor so that I can actually see the subject, etc. There are so many reasons to add things onto your camera rig, and it's actually kind of important to have that stuff. But more importantly than that, when you show up on set with a rig that looks like this, a lot of people are just gonna take you a lot more seriously, especially when you're at events. You even gain access to certain parts of the event that maybe other photographers or videographers won't get access to, like VIP rooms and things like that. And then there are also other reasons to just show up with something like this. If you're trying to take B-roll out on the street, it's probably good to be inconspicuous and have something as small as this. The LCD screen does just fine, and I would even go with a smaller lens just to be a little bit more inconspicuous. But anyway, let's get into the 3 camera rig setups that I want to talk about today. The first one is my gimbal setup. So I use these handles here by UU Rig. I think that's how it's said. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but I really do love these handles. They're adjustable. You could also mount things. They have these little shoe mounts here, and also these 1/4-20 threads and these other threads here that you can attach things to as well. Pretty cool. And then these handles are also adjustable to just give you the right amount of width, you know, so you're comfortable with your rig. This is probably the main piece of gear that I use on that rig, but I also use one of these free world monitors. Now, this is a 7-inch monitor. I know I'm probably gonna get ringed for the size of this thing, but I actually really love this for this particular setup. And the reason is because I have really bad eyes. If you noticed, I wear glasses. I don't have very great vision, and I also have a hard time focusing on things as well. Sometimes I'm running, so when I'm running, it's really hard for me to focus on a smaller screen. I need as much real estate as I possibly can get. Now, if I'm using a bigger setup, I'll normally opt for something smaller, like a 5-inch, but this works great. I also bought this as a director's monitor. I have a cage for it that I use. So this was great. I wanted as big of a screen as I can get, and this is what I got at the time. I got this many years ago, and it's always worked out great. Another piece of gear that I use is this Rode VideoMic Pro, and I got this a while back as well when I started vlogging on the channel, and I just put it on one of these handles. Yeah, that's the mic. Other than that, it's just the gimbal itself, and this is just the DJI Ronin. It's the older version, and the reason why I use this is because, again, it's what I have available. Eventually, I'd like to upgrade, but I can't justify spending the money when I already have this one and it works really well. Maybe one day, but for right now, this works really great. Anyway, let's move on. Okay, so next up is my little run and gun system. Now, I actually love this little run and gun system. I mainly use this when I'm on a documentary shoot and I'm trying to just running after the subject or trying to capture a moment or something like that. I really need to be able to work on the fly. So this setup is simple. Let's piece it together. First, we have this half cage by small rig. This thing is amazing. I've had it for quite a few years, never changed out the handle. This is also a small rig handle that has a shoe mount on top, and then also a little slot for the battery so the battery can slip right out. And the coolest part about it is that it has this. It also at the bottom has a Allen wrench that magnetizes right in, so you never lose it. Other than that, I'm using the top handle that actually came with the FX3. Now, I had several small rig top handles that I loved, but I ended up giving a lot of that stuff away. This came with a top handle, and actually I could use this to get professional audio as well. I will sometimes put my Sennheiser MKE600 on the top handle of this camera and use that as scratch audio. On top of that handle, I have this small rig field monitor mount. And I like this because it swivels back and forth and also swivels side to side. I will also sometimes put the Free World 7-inch monitor on there, but this could be a bit big and look kind of hilarious on top of this small camera rig. But lately I have been using my phone, and I have this little device that allows me to use my phone, and it has all the pro monitoring features and actually some more than that monitor that I could use. You may have seen it online before. This video is going to be coming out soon, so stay tuned because I'm really excited about that. And then to power the field monitor, I'm usually using Sony NPF batteries. I carry a few of these around, but one of these lasts for a decent amount of time. I think I might go through 2 of them in an 8-hour period. I can't remember. Another thing that I use on this setup, and actually the gimbal setup as well, that I forgot to mention, is a variable ND filter. And the last thing for this setup is just plenty of these Sony Z batteries. And the reason for this is because I'm trying to keep things light, and I just keep plenty of these with me, switching them out, charging them every day, and it just works out great for me. Now, I'll only do this if I'm shooting for just a few hours at a time. If I'm out for just the whole day, I usually like to use these FX Lion Nano 1s. I have a couple of these, but that's more for our next setup, so let's talk about that one. So again, starting with the top handle, and actually one thing that I forgot to talk about was this extension arm for the top handle of the FX3. I like this because this top handle is super short, and I would often hold it like this, which was very uncomfortable, and instead I could just hold it like this, like a normal top handle. I love this top handle, but we already talked about that, so let's move on. Next, I put on the cage, again, the small rig half cage, and with that, I also put on this base plate with these rods here. It works really well for my setup. And then I have this battery V-mount here. I bought this many years ago. I just needed something for my V-mount batteries, and I thought this would be great because I could plug in my monitor as well, so it'll power the monitor and the camera at the same time. So I opted for this. However, I would probably buy something a lot smaller, and actually I did buy something a lot smaller. I just haven't done that yet, but I like the fact that this can power everything instead of just, the camera. And again, on this, I'm putting the FX Lion. I go from USB-A to USB-C on my camera. That powers the camera. And then of course, I plug in my field monitor here in the 12-volt output, and that powers the field monitor. I could go D-tap if I'd like, but I just decided not to do that. All right, next thing. Sometimes I will use the Rode VideoMic Pro, and sometimes I'll use my Sennheiser MKE600, which is what I'm using now for this audio and this talking head. Here's some B-roll of what that looks like. I really love this mic, and it sounds really great, but mainly I'm using this mic for, interviews. Sometimes I'll put, a DJI mic on my subject as well as a backup, but most of the time I'm using this audio. And then of course, sometimes I will have a wireless system. I've used the Hollyland wireless system before. I used to own it. I sold it. I don't really use the wireless systems that often unless I'm on a high-level narrative film or TV commercial client project, and then I'll just rent it, or I'll borrow that same one that I sold to a friend. Then I'll put a follow focus system. I usually will use the Nucleus, can't remember what it's called, but here it is on the screen, and some B-roll for you. This is what I use for a follow focus system, and then that will usually go directly to my director's monitor. What else? The next thing I would do is put on this matte box. It's made by Small Rig. I bought it a long time ago. Now these days I'm starting to see these mini matte boxes, which I really love personally. The smaller I can get my rig, the better. So I might sell this one and buy one of these smaller versions in the near future. However, this is what I have now. So when I do need a matte box, this is what I use. Again, this is just what works personally for me. I do believe in the appearance matters. If you are working with a client, they're gonna wanna know that their money is being well spent. And when they see this full-size camera rig with the matte box and mics and wireless systems and things like that, it's really gonna ensure the client that you're gonna do an excellent job. So really just consider this in a balance. All of the gear matters when it comes to that particular moment with your client, but it also doesn't matter so much when it comes to making a great film or even a really great video. I have a whole video dedicated to this topic, so I'll leave a link in the description below. All of the gear that you've seen in this video, I've acquired over many years and only bought when I needed it. I do love gear. I love buying gear and trying new things out and all of the rest. However, I am a huge believer in using only what you need and not going out and spending money on stuff that's just gonna sit on a shelf. And again, all of this is just what works best for me. You're gonna find what works best for you on your journey as a filmmaker. So I would just wanna encourage you to do more research, try new things out, try to borrow things if you can, and just see what works best for you. Well, that's gonna do it for me, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. If you liked this video or you learned something, please click the like button down below. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll catch you in the next one. Laters.